Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast, episode 151. We're fortunate to have Nicole Erickson here. She was on the podcast before, episode 112. You can go back and listen to that. That one was about the player, the athlete. This is one about the parents of the athlete. She has a new course, The Parents of the Champion. Welcome, Nicole.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
The world of podcasts. Let's just start right with your new course. Tell us about the new course. Yvonne Oseretz and I've listened to it, gone through it.
So the new course, working with so many youth athletes, I would often get parents that were looking for resources to help their athlete as well and to, have more backing behind things that they're saying, taking pressure off their athlete, building their athlete's confidence. And so I took what I learned in school through research, and I put together a course, an at-home course, because I felt like that would be easy, accessible to parents, and also more comfortable to go through the course. And so really the layout of that was, first things first is giving them some sort of grounding technique to help them in those moments where the emotions are very high, and to just kind of center themselves, bring them back to the moment. And so that is in the first module. And then from there, it's really diving into, knowing themselves to help their athletes. And there they'll learn about and self-reflect on their past performance, their investment in their child, the hopes and fears for their athlete, and how that affects the way that they, have a relationship with their athlete, how they respond and react to different situations. The next module is on, what do you want to represent as a parent, and really learning about the different parenting styles, being more informed about that, figuring out as a parent what you want to do. I really just give the information, and then also what are those values for you, what really matters deep down in your heart, and how does the parenting style that you chose and the values that you have align together to really help your athlete and teach them what you care about. And then from there, it's communication. So taking what you've learned from the self-reflection, and also, what truly matters to you and how you want to be as a parent, and communicating that to your athlete. And I teach different skills within that, from active listening to modeling to feedback and reinforcement. And then there's a nice wrap-up module at the end. So lots of content to go through. I know parents are very busy, but it's full of really great information.
With Nicole, we do this now in the beginning, do it at the end. Let me go through how I know Nicole. She's the mental performance coach at FM, the FM Performance Center here in Boynton Beach, Florida. And she's worked with a number of players. I know one, I really don't like credibility. Credibility, how's it go? Credibility doesn't mean you're truthful. It means you're believable. I always tease and say the tennis business is a credibility business, but here's a shot for credibility. One of the players of ours that you've worked with secured a number one ranking last year in the country. That's not, make an understatement, easily done. Another player is in England right now as we speak for Junior Wimbledon. I know a couple of Canadians are ranked 2 in the country that are going to represent Canada this summer. This ties into the course, but your time at FM and time before that, do you actually have sessions? I know you now have a course for parents, but when you have sessions, are they open sessions with the player and the parent and then together? Mm-hmm. So they do that, but then just with the parents by themselves? Is the player's not there?
So that's a really great question. So it all depends on the wants of the client. So at times, every package that I present to youth athletes, there is the opportunity within those packages to have parent meetings. And those are 30-minute parent meetings. And so I do meet with parents if they take advantage of that within the package. I also have parents that will sit in on sessions so that they can really, learn from their athlete about what the athlete's experiencing and how they can better help and reinforce what we talk about. But again, it all depends on what the parent and the athlete want. I have some parents that are very removed because they want their athlete to, be open and trusting of the relationship. And they feel like the best way to do that is to just hear about, hey, what skills are you doing? Okay, great. How's it going? Good, great. There's other parents that want to be more involved. And I think there's a benefit to all the options.
And what about parents combined? Fortunately, when you in our world, when you meet a junior tennis player, most of the time you meet two parents. So I always say, yeah, I think I've met twice as many parents as I have players. But the parents, just having one parent, I think if you mentioned people are time poverty, they're so busy. Do you find it a lot of times you're dealing just with one parent?
Yeah.
And not both?
Yes. Yeah. It's usually I'm in communication with one. I've had like a few where I am working, the parents will switch off. Like mom will come one session, dad will come another session, or we're in a group text all together, or a group email where we're all talking, or the phone meetings where the mom and the parent, or the mom and the dad, are on the call as well. So again, just really depends on the parents' needs. I think the benefit of having both parents, if they're really involved and wanting to communicate with me and learn more, it's best to have both, because then they're, just better communication, direct communication.
From our notes, values.
Yes.
I didn't touch upon values.
Yes. So values are really interesting, in life and in sport, especially business. I mean, really anything. It's very results based. And we're always, we were talking about this before we started the call, right? Standards and expectations. And we tend to focus a lot on the results, and we tend to really become motivated by results. And in reality, we don't have control over those. We don't have control over the results. We have an opponent. I can't control how many clients I get, because if I did, I'd be making lots and lots of money, right? So we don't have control over the results. All we can do is the best that we can do. And so what values really helps us with is to find a motivation within and direction from within, because your values are something that matters truly, truly deep down. It's going to sound cheesy, but truly deep down in your heart. Okay. The opposite of this, and I say this in the course, is usually when something you're really bothered by that someone else does, that is a signpost for a value, right? So something that really, like for me, for instance, something that really irks me is I am very direct and honest. And so when someone is, beating around the bush and exaggerating a little bit and probably not telling the truth, it really, really agitates me. So what values do is it gives you direction to live out, to be the person that you want to be. And that really, it lights a fire inside you, because you're living the life that you want. You're living out what matters to you. And so that's that new motivation, rather than, if you're not getting those results, but you're being that person, it's still fulfilling, right? You're living out that purpose.
Oh, that's great. Non-judgmental view.
Yes.
Comment on that.
Non-judgmental view. So what I like to say for non-judgmental view is compassion, curiosity, and kindness. We tend to judge very much all things, ourselves, others, situations, and it's easy and it's quick and it's reactionary, happening constantly. And so a non-judgmental view is when you're really learning how to find compassion within yourself, toward others and toward yourself, right? And so really that's going to help with the communication. It's going to help with ourselves when we're self-reflecting and being aware of things that we're doing, whether they are good or bad. I'm putting up the air quotations. And that's really what we want, because if we're able to have that non-judgmental view, compassion toward ourselves, we're going to be more honest with ourselves. We're going to be able to reflect and see what needs to be changed, what change needs to happen, what things we need to do more of because it's great, right? And then from there, we're also teaching our kids how to have that non-judgmental view as well.
One thought from the course is,
Yes.
aligning the parental style or parent styles,
Mhm.
two styles with values.
Yes.
The parents many times have different approaches.
Yeah. Yes.
And why don't you comment on that a little bit?
So the parenting styles, there's 4 different parenting styles. And what's so important and why the course is so great is you really dive into and learn about what those 4 are. And then from there, you kind of reflect on, you don't kind of, you do. You reflect on what you fall into. Now, these aren't like stable, right? It's not, it's something that fluctuates depending on the situation. So parents may resonate with multiple, right? They may say, oh, well, sometimes I'm the strict parent, authoritarian. Sometimes I'm the supportive parent, the authoritative parent, right? Or the friend parent. And so it fluctuates, but knowing what you really want to truly lean into, and then also how does that, again, align with those values, what truly matters to you is so important because, if you're the authoritative parent, the strict parent, those tend to be, lots of control. If you do something wrong, no, not good. Like there is a consequence, and you have to go by the rules, right? Authoritative is more the supportive parent. There are rules, but there's flexibility where it's all right. So let's talk it out. What's going on there? So then you look at your values, right? And authoritarian, probably honest, probably respect. Those values fall under that. Right. And so it's how can you live out your values through your parenting style? Because if you're kind of doing the opposite, if you're like the friend parent, but you value respect, you could find that in there. But depending on the level of respect you're looking for and you're the friend parent that has not many boundaries or rules, it's going to be confusing for the child.
Oh, I mean, to make an understanding, parenting is not easy.
No.
With, just the clarity, the consistency, the message. You talk a little bit about it where it's not really the scoreboard, and how that has to start from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And it's tough. I like your comment there about, one, parenting is not easy. 2, it is inconsistent. But I think, as a parent, having that awareness, or even as a coach, as a person, having that awareness of when you're being inconsistent and pointing it out to the child or to the person that you're in a relationship with, right? That's going to bring clarity. That's going to say, hey, I know that, I said this and now I'm doing this. It's going to bring clarity and communication to the situation. And it's going to show that I'm not perfect. None of us are, right? And then from an early age, like you were saying, as far as results go, that's tough too. And I think that ties into that first, well, technically second module, knowing yourself to help your athlete, because it talks about investment. It talks about your hopes and fears for your athlete. And if you really think about that, parents, we already talked about it, the time that they spend with their, taking their athletes all around, the money, the emotional investment, the fears that they have, because a lot of parents will come to me and say, I see my athlete working so hard and it devastates me to see them not having fun or not performing as well as I know that they can, and they're upset about it. So there's fear in there. And so once you're able to figure out what that is, I think you'll, as parents, as anybody, again, it's easier to say, let's just focus on the growth. Let's focus on the development rather than the results.
Yeah. How does it go where do you have to win to have fun?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's fun to win? From just the get-go, working with parents, I've heard so many times that, you know, kids don't come with directions. Do you find that parents sometimes are not even aware of what their style is, or they just kind of know that they're authoritative or submissive, supportive?
Yeah. I would say most of the time from the conversations that I've had, uh, in between. In between. Like I've had parents where they tell me they're sitting in front of me and they say, previously I was this way and I wasn't aware of it. But then I heard myself on a video, or I recognized it later on, and I know now that hurt my athlete, and we need to figure this out. And so I think those big moments, those light bulb moments, help parents to recognize where they're at. And again, I think it depends on the person. But I think sometimes it's hard to know. That's why even in sport, that's why we film ourselves. So you could see your body language. So you could see what decisions you're making on the court, because you can't remember what you're doing. I remember I'd get off the basketball court and I'm very self-critical and I'm a perfectionist, and I would get off the court and all I would remember was everything that I did wrong. And my parents would be like, you scored, you stole the ball, you scored a bunch, like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, I did everything wrong. So I think that it's tough to know what we're doing at times, and to be self-aware.
With parents, I think back about my father. He used to have one. It seemed like he had one question for me. I'd be fooling around and not doing homework, and he would just ask me, when do the report cards come out? My question would be, do you think there's so many complexities that the kids become confused because the parents may be really easygoing about everything but, say, the scoreboard winning? And so their parenting style, away from the court, the field, the ball game, it may be very easygoing, but then all of a sudden they're just Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah. I would say that would be very confusing, right? Because it's inconsistent. Inconsistent. And again, that's why I think the self-reflection and the self-awareness is so important, and knowing, like, again, your investment and your hopes and fears for your child, because I think that's really where it probably stems from, or your past performance. I know that I don't have kids, but I was an athlete that had parents. And I know that when I get older, if my kids even want to play sports, I hope they do. I'm going to put them in sports. But it's, if I have to be aware of my performance story, because it's a tough one. I didn't achieve what I wanted to, and I know I could have. But it just wasn't in the cards for me, I guess. I don't know. 2 ACL injuries later in high school made it a decision that I wish I was more informed about. I wish I did more research on, and I didn't go play in college. And so I didn't achieve that. And so I know that's going to come up for me, or surface for me, when my athletes are going through that. And to be honest with you, it's something that I have to manage when I'm working with my athletes currently. I have athletes that are high school athletes that are looking to go to college, that are going into college, that have committed recently. And as they're talking to me about those things, as a mental performance coach, I have to manage my stuff and pretty much like leave it out so that I can do my job properly. Right. And it's tough.
We touched upon this in our podcast on brain typing, where the athlete, we always say they can be the ping pong ball going back and forth between one parent and the next, because the styles are contrasting. Having players, not the athlete, not become the master manipulator where they work one parent against the other. Your course parents have championed people going through that. I would think the awareness level, so everybody's right, as you said, transparency, that's on the table, and people know the cards, and this is the way I am, and I know I need to the parent needs to be aware of that as well, both parents, and then they have to work together.
Which also can be tough at times, but I think also not only an awareness, but that communication module is so like gold. It's gold because it teaches you how to communicate in a more productive manner.
Talk a little bit about verbal, nonverbal. You touched upon that. You mentioned it briefly.
Yes. So actually, to everyone's surprise, 50 to 70% of our communication is nonverbal, which is pretty wild. But verbal communication is what we're doing right now, speaking to one another. Nonverbal gestures with our hands, which I'm doing a lot of, facial expressions, and if you really think about it, especially with tennis, a lot of kids that I see look over at their parents, they're looking for those nonverbals. Athletes that play team sports, they're looking over their coaches or their parents, and they're looking at those nonverbals.
Yeah, I think in practice, when families are smaller and smaller, when there's just constant eye contact, it's separation anxiety is I think that's understandable in early childhood development classes. When a 5-year-old is looking for mom, looking for dad. Yeah. But as the child gets older, I can definitely see where people in various sports, like in tennis, where you have the 20 seconds in between. Obviously, in a sport you grew up in, you could comment on that basketball. I don't really think of basketball players looking in the stands to make eye contact with their parents.
You'd be surprised.
I'm sure they do it, but it's not. Yeah, they shouldn't do it.
No, you don't have much time to do it, but they do it. Yeah.
But no, I mean, I've always heard 70%, and I tell tennis parents, try to be the furthest parent from the fence. Yeah. Be behind everybody else. Yeah. And then also, if you could be a tennis parent where you're really doing well, it's like an umpire who goes unnoticed. If you're at a tournament and no one knows that you're the parent, you're doing a very good job. So the child will have all sorts of negative self-talk. You think many times that's a reflection, just because that comes to the negativity from the inner circle, from the parents?
Could be. It could be. I mean, I could count the amount of times today where I've said out loud when something didn't go my way, whether it be, a text that I wasn't happy that I got, to me just dropping my phone and me saying, oh my goodness, what idiot, or, whatever.
Yeah, right. Just natural.
So just natural. It's just a reaction. But yeah, they see that and it's like, okay, well, this is what I do. Right. Now, some of it can come environment. Some they might see from people on the court next to them while they're practicing, and they pick up on it. You never know what they see on TV as well. So there's a lot of things, but I think that, they're around the parents the most. And so in communication, I talk about modeling, and modeling is you showing the behavior so that they can observe it. So if you are wanting your athlete to talk more positive to yourself, try to go back on and recognize your negative self-talk out loud, right? Maybe it's in traffic and you're in the car and someone's cutting you off or something, or whatever, and you're yelling, right? Let's try to bring that back a little bit. Also, when you do it, that's also a really, really great way to teach. You make the mistake, what you're not wanting them to do, and say, hey, look what I just did. One, I made a mistake. I probably shouldn't be doing that. What else could I say right now? Or what else could I do? And then you could problem solve together. And they're learning how to manage those situations. You're teaching them how to do that. It's harder said than done. But yeah, that's what teaches them.
I've heard many people at sports banquets, they get up and go, well, I'll try to make it short and sweet, but I'll at least make it short. I'm not capable of making it sweet. talk about over communicating versus just being simple to the point.
So I feel like that's tough too, depending on the person, depending on the situation. I think knowing, what you want to get across and explaining it in a way that makes sense. I remember this was in undergrad. I was part of this. I was a manager for intramural sports. And so we had tons of training that we would do because essentially I was hiring referees, I was training referees, I was managing the night. So there would be like 2 or 3 of us at the fields, at the basketball courts. And if anyone was getting rowdy, we had to kick them out. We had to make sure everyone that was on the courts was supposed to be there, that front desk was doing the right things, that we were evaluating refs, all this stuff. I remember we did this activity for one of the trainings, and they had us in groups, and they said, okay, you're going to write instructions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And we're like, oh, what? Okay. So we write in our groups, and they take the sheets from us, and they pretend like they have the peanut butter and jelly, all the ingredients in front of them, and they start reading, and it's like, okay, put the peanut butter on the bread. And they're like, the guy, our boss was exaggerating, but he starts like scooping it with his hand and pretending like he's putting the peanut butter on you know what I mean? And so just like little things like that, like learning how to be more direct was something so simple, right? It's like, I'm trying to think of examples. I mean, you might know some from coaching, right? You just have to be so specific. And I think the more specific you are, the more simplified it can be, right? KISS, keep it simple, stupid. But if you're someone that over communicates, which I tend to do, I feel like I'm doing it right now. You can really learn how to narrow it down or figure out how to bring it down once you realize how you're over communicating.
Oh, we could come back to so many things, but the exposure that you'd have in that setting, I can, for our listeners, just get a visual on, intramurals and all the different sports and the athletes. And you think about, like you mentioned, the referees and this and that. But in the tennis world, I know tennis coaches listening, is you could ask your players, myself in a little bit of trouble for this, but it's could be a negative, is you can ask some tennis kids, what's a PBJ? And they may not even know.
Yeah.
That's one question. What's a peanut butter, PBJ? Peanut butter and jelly, but then ask, do they know how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? A few insiders would remember this, but it wasn't too many years ago where a player asked me for peanut butter and toast. They asked me, do you put the peanut butter on first, or do you put it on after the toast pops out of the toaster?
Oh, boy.
And that type of question just lets you know that they've never made peanut butter and toast. That mom, in this case, you pick on dad too, that mom, right. That's where mom does everything. I think that, communication is obviously got to be a two-way street, but I like the segment in your course where be ready to listen, active listening. Talk about that, where the parents, they need to stop and be reflective, and do a better job of listening. Why you expand upon that?
Yeah. So active listening is really being engaged in the conversation to where you can repeat back what has been said in a different way. And now I feel like a lot of times for us, it's really easy to be on our phones while we're talking to someone. It's really easy to be reading something. It's really easy to be watching the TV and trying to talk, whether it's like the athlete on the phone or watching the TV, or you are on the phone watching the TV, right? So making sure just to put those down and making eye contact with each other. And again, goes back to modeling. If you are showing how to actively listen, make eye contact, which I know all parents want their kids to do, it's going to teach them how to do it. But you got to do it. Right? You want to make that eye contact. You want to show them what to do and what your standard is. And then also repeating back. I mean, I got training in it, right? But I can tell you the amount of times, one athlete in particular comes to mind, where I'll give a summary. They'll go on for like 20 minutes and I'll give a summary of what they said. And they're like, they can't believe how I've just repeated back pretty much everything that they've said. Right? And so to be able to do that and really be engaged in the conversation, just it opens them up even more because they know that what they're saying is of value to you.
The eye contact over the years, we've made it really a point to, when a young athlete meets a parent of another athlete, they meet a coach, shake hands, have eye contact, not to look down and give the handshake becomes the dead fish.
Right.
It's just amazing. Most parents are like, thank you. But I've had lots of years of experience. I've had a time or two where the parents were upset that we were teaching their child to do something so basic, like, that's my job. You just teach tennis. Okay. But it's it's really all one. I mean, I think that's what people really need to understand. Mm-hmm. That, is it 50-50? But I do think that for the parent, many times the child, you would know because you had so many sessions with one-on-one sessions, especially with players, that the child doesn't have, the athlete doesn't have anything to say. They're just emotional and they're locked up. You're shut down and they're not ready to communicate. Mm-hmm. I think also too, when you talk about that, is picking the right time to communicate.
Definitely. There's always a right time, right? There's always a better time, I guess you could say. And that's really what you all know your athletes best, parents, understanding when it is best to talk about, difficult moments. But I think too, a big thing is silence, which I talk about in the course as well. Especially with younger athletes, but even older athletes, by giving them silence, which is literally if you're asking a question and you're waiting for them to respond and you just are quiet. I see that it gives them the time to think about their answer because I think a lot of the times, and I could be completely wrong, but a lot of times they're just trying to figure out the right way to say it and the correct answer. Because that's what we've been programmed to do. All of us. Right. We gotta be right. We can't be wrong. One, because we're afraid of getting in trouble or we're afraid of getting embarrassed, right? So we have to think about the right way to say it. And so I think that, like I said, it's important to know when the right time is to talk with the athlete and to engage in specific topics. But then too, when you do engage in those topics, using that technique of, silence is so powerful because, again, you're giving them time to really think about their answer, think about what you said. And then guess what? When they respond, you could use silence yourself to think about and process your answer. And it's amazing what just giving them that time to sit with really allows the conversation to go.
I think ideally in tennis is to give a kid 24 hours. They've played, win or lose, go through maybe a few things. Mm-hmm. Just the norm, as long as it's a great effort, great attitude. Yeah. But that expression, silence is golden, is very, very, very appropriate. Yeah. I think what happens many times in the world of junior tennis is kids will survive the storm. They know they have unconditional love. Mm-hmm. The parents aren't going to, no food, sleep in the garage. Right. It's right. The dark cloud is not as dark as they think, but they survive the storm and they know the storm will come again. Mm-hmm. And many times because of that, they don't make the change. Today on TV, Roger Federer is a tournament in Germany, a tune-up Halle for Wimbledon. He won it 10 times in a row, and he's there. I've read so much about Roger Federer, like everybody in the tennis world. And there was many times where he would misbehave as a kid and there'd be a ride home, just, playing tournaments, within Switzerland. Yeah. And he would say it would just be total silence in the car. Really? The parents were on the same page and instead of saying anything, and that many times can be much more powerful.
Mhm.
Here's another thought with those car rides is the great Wayne Gretzky, and I had a chance to observe his father in person in Brantford, Ontario. But
Wow.
Wayne Gretzky was told, you have God-given talent, and his father's name Wally. He said, "No, I don't have God-given talent. I have Wally-given talent." And it wasn't a sacrilegious comment. It just said his father, was there for his upbringing in ice hockey and upbringing in life.
Right.
But easygoing Wally, according to his son, is that, win or lose, it was like smoke was coming out of his ears. And if the car ride was 1 hour or the car ride was 4 hours, from the beginning of the trip to the end of the trip, he constantly was coaching him. And I think one of the reasons Wayne Gretzky is great is he was zoomed in on that. It was like, okay, this is it. It's kind of like Maria Sharapova said many years ago, and her father Yuri was a screamer.
Yeah.
And said, "I figured out a long time ago, my father's for me, not against me." And you could comment on that. I think so many young tennis players become the victim. Their parents they're working harder than the kid, and they're making so many sacrifices.
Yeah.
And the kid doesn't realize that, they're your biggest fans.
Mhm.
Why don't you comment a few things on that?
Well, I think that's the toughest part. I think that's the hardest part. And I think that ties into, the feeling not like on the parents' end, not feeling appreciated. And wondering, how can I get more out of my athlete? How can I help my athlete? How can I feel more appreciated for everything I'm doing for them, for being their biggest fan? And that is tough. That is so tough. And I think that, again, knowing who you are in this course, I don't tell you what sort of parent to be. I just give you the information and you choose, and you take the skills at the end on the communication and use it as you will. But I think figuring out ways to figure that out. I think the communication is going to help you to open up that, to feel more appreciated. But also, we're starting so young. Athletes are starting so young, and the expectations of, 12-year-old to or 8-year-old or 15-year-old. I mean, when I was 15, I definitely appreciated my parents, but did I really show that as much as I probably could? No. I was 15.
Right.
Same as when I was 12. I mean, I show it now. I tell you that. I show it now, but back then I was giving my parents a run for their money, even though they were, you know what I mean? It's just they're young, but that's tough as a parent because, like you said, they're running all over the place. They're putting in more work for their kid to be able to do a sport, so that they can play. And then when the results aren't there, where is that return on the investment? Where is that appreciation? Or what does that even look like for the parent? So I think the purpose behind the course is more so to bring clarity and to help. It's not really to tell you how to parent, because I think the parent-athlete relationship is so unique and difficult because I don't know what goes on at home. I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know, when the parents sit in on the sessions, I'm talking more to the kid than I am the parent. So I only know so much, and I get an hour with them. So you all know each other best, and you all know how to, or can learn, or know, or both, how to manage that relationship best. And this is just information and skills to help you, to help that make it better,
Here's a short story you could comment on. I just listened to John McEnroe, and his two brothers are graduates of Stanford. He went 1 year, and then he was a Wimbledon semifinals before he went to Stanford. And he was saying that you get a visual on it, listen to the commencement speech. But he said, speak up, and even with your parents, to say, to be able to take a stand. And he said, okay, there's a meeting, and McEnroe's mother this is not an anti-Semitic remark. She was Jewish, and I've said for years that the Jewish moms are the best coaches in the world. They cultivate achievement. You're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, or you will die. And then the dad, tough Irishman who had to work nights to become a lawyer and such. But the dad was, really a yeller and screamer, and the mom, like, why'd you get a 95 on the test? Why didn't you get a better score?
Right.
And McEnroe, the rage of perfection, and he didn't want to get an A. He wanted to get the best score in the class.
Yeah.
But he said what came out of the meeting is kind of fun stories. He said, the dad said, well, I just want you to get a scholarship and represent your country. And then McEnroe goes, yeah, but I'm only 12. Why don't you circle back and just talk about what do you think as far as blending the different styles? You think people pull that off, or you find yourself, and obviously it doesn't put someone in a box, but do you think that from your course and just reflective thought that people can try to take the best of each style?
Yeah, I do. I think if it's done well, because again, you don't want to confuse the athlete. Like going back to the question that you had as far as, if the styles don't align or they're jumping from style to style, will it be confusing? It can be. And that's what you just want to be wary of as far as if you're trying to take the best from every style. But I think there's, magic within that. If you could be the friend parent while still having, some rules, and then also having like a good bit of control, but still flexibility. I mean, I feel like, and this is just me more like giving my opinion, but I feel like the authoritarian, which is like very much in control, very much involved, like their way or the highway kind of parenting, and then the friend parent where it's like no rules, like I just want to be your friend, like I just want you to like me. I feel like the authoritative, the supportive parent is kind of like a combination of both of those. Because the authoritative, there are rules, there are boundaries, but there's flexibility within that. They're highly involved, and they want high achievement for their kid, but they're open to listening to their athlete. So I feel like that's a combination of the two. And then the absent parent, I would advise against the absent parent. And that's like any research really would say that, which is the fourth one. So yeah.
I think with the curriculum we have, the pathway, especially in early childhood development, fundamentals. I mean, again, you've worked with athletes from so many sports, so you could touch upon that. But like say, for example, the grip of a lifetime. Hang onto the racket this way. Have the swing go this way. And these are the directions. So I do think in the early years, it's very, very important to be authoritative to the point where, this is the sound and shape. Let's move on to B. And we can't be too loosey-goosey about that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's very fair.
I do think we have to praise parents. I know one mom, her child is an excellent tennis player, and did video work with this player. And on our podcast, we certainly have had more interviews with tennis coaches than tennis parents.
Yeah.
Although I go back to Rob Krajicek, I mean, his son just became ranked #1 in the world in doubles.
Wow.
And we had another parent, Joey Johnson, and his son is back from a mission and he's on his way to UCLA.
Wow.
But I would say this is, I again, you have the coaches be mad at me, but I think it's much more, if you evaluate what the parents are doing, Dick Braden used to always say socioeconomic functionalism. This is in tennis. If, he'll say a lot of tennis pros couldn't afford their own lessons. And I think that what a lot of parents, if they stopped and thought about it, and don't have it be, one want it to be a circle back and be a negative, but I think you have to pay your dues much more with what parents do for a living versus in tennis. In tennis, in your sport, basketball, for people to be connected as a basketball coach, generally they have to be higher, coach maybe always in this country, they have to be connected with higher level of education. To have a degree, have say a master's degree. You're not going to be a high school coach or a college coach if you haven't gone through academia. But in tennis, you can just hang up your shingle. You don't really, it's like, oh, I'm good to go. But no, I think that's interesting. It circles back to the simplicity. I do think that, if you comment on this, is that a tennis player, and you can talk about other athletes, unless they're a Renaissance kid and they're doing, say, music, theater, for the most part, they have school and they have their sport.
Yep.
And the parent has a lot more, especially if they have multiple
Kids.
siblings.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the kids is basically you got to do your homework and you got to train.
Yep.
But I don't think parents enough. And I think right here in this area, Coco Goff she's being her homeschool teachers, her grandmother 1 and grandmother 2. A lot of times parents are newcomers to the sport.
Right.
And if they were talking more about their life and just maybe their struggles in academia or to climb the ladder.
Yes.
Why don't you just comment on that a little bit?
Well, I completely agree. And I do, I want to go back for a second to what you said, because I think it's really important. I think that's like one of the hardest parts about, talking from my position, talking about parenting and coaching. You all do like great work. I mean, and you have a lot to do as well. And so I just want to reiterate in a positive way, like the amount that you do, that's why you're a parent. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing what you do. And I, again, going back to, I recognized it when I was younger with my parents and all that they did for me and drove me around. And I was fortunate enough to where my dad could drive me to all the tournaments, and we'd have girls from my team that would ride with us and stay with us. I was very, very, very fortunate. And I think definitely back then, I could have showed more appreciation as an athlete. But I will say now that I do recognize all that they did for me and all that parents do for them. And it is that the parents are the biggest fan. So just wanted to comment that, because I think it's really important, especially talking about all this stuff. It can be, I'm sure it's off-putting at times for parents or coaches to listen to, But anyway, so going back to your question, let me let me think about this, what you had asked. Hold on. Silence.
It's good.
I'm trying to jog my memory.
I can go back. It
was about, yeah. Could you go back for me?
With, the parent, a couple points. One is, it's especially they're newcomers to the sports.
Yes.
And instead of talking about the sport itself, and sometimes they're not that much further along, even though they're the adult, they're not much that further along in the sport with experience in the kid.
Right.
But they're just reflected upon other experiences, other challenges,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, tennis and I keep going to tennis, but sport is a microcosm of life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so I agree with you. I think that, like I said, I agree, because you don't even have to talk about what happened to you in the past. You could talk about your day. You have a work meeting that you have to present at and you're feeling nervous. Tell them about that. I feel nervous about having to present. I have a meeting with my boss. I'm feeling nervous. I had a crappy day. And, I probably didn't do as much work as I could have. And it was just a bad day for me, and I'm beating myself up about it. I want to do more. I'm going to tell you the next time when I'm having a bad day, but I do the amount of work that I want to do. Little things like that. It doesn't even have to be about the past. And I think, again, that goes back to that modeling technique of being open with your kid and teaching them, the life lessons that you're going through on a day-to-day basis, and applying it then applying it to tennis, like, hey, those days where you just don't want to show up to practice, but you go anyway and you give what you have in the tank, and it might not be that great of a practice. I had a work day like that. We got to figure out how we can motivate each other, make it fun. Because that being genuine like that and showing them that it's normal, and that you're going through that too and working through that as well, is going to make them feel, one, better about it, but then also learn about it, learn how to manage it and brainstorm with you. And then they feel like they have more say in their learning and the conversations, and it makes it a lot more fun. Like I have this, I did a session the other day on what's in your control, what's out of your control. And every session that I do at the end, we look at the lists or the activity. I said, okay, so taking a look at all this on the board, how often do you think you focus on the things out of your control? All the time. The answer is so much more than the things that are in your control. And I remember I was working with this young kid, and he goes, yeah, all this stuff, I focus so much on the things out of my control. And, he seemed a little defeated by it. So I go to him, I said, so do I. Every day I have to remind myself of the things within my control, because I start to get caught up in the things out of my control. And he looks at me, he goes, still? I said, yes, still. So, and I think, in that moment, it was just kind of like, one, normalizing his feelings about like, oh man, like I stink, but really you don't, because I go through it as well, and I'm an adult. And two, that you can continue to work at it. It's a continuous process. And what was really cool was Mom was in the session too, and she said, so do I. And he's like, oh man, like, wow, okay. So like just little moments like that too.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's great. With question I ask parents quite often, I'll ask kids too. Your parents, you don't have to raise your hand, but do your parents ever get mad? Have your parents ever been upset with you? And it's 100%.
Yeah, of course.
And there's some kids like, oh, really? I wouldn't. You don't do everything wrong. Why would your parents get mad at you? You're like the perfect kid. And so to ask parents, do you swear on a regular basis around your kids? You never swear around your kids? Oh, you do swear. Because I'll ask kids that. Do your parents swear? Do your parents ever swear? And it's like what you can just tell the reaction is like 100% swear. But then is when they swear and that's a question to ask parents. It's a problem if they swear over bad results, losing. Mm-hmm. To me, I think I would say it's A-okay once in a while, you get their attention, but if you're swearing over their poor attitude or their poor effort, they're just not putting energy forth. Here's a quick story on profanity. Actually, coaches, their heart rate they'll relax when they swear. They just let it out.
Yeah.
Like, rah,
Right.
So there is that side of it. But, and I apologize if I've said this on the podcast before, but this is a story where I had 2 cameras set up, and I had the coaches. It was an educational workshop with parents, players, and coaches, and I had the players go outside. Mm-hmm. And I had the parents stay in the room. And, there's maybe 30 people, 2 cameras, and I intentionally, the SHIT word, and I say it 3 times loud. I throw my keys down, and we're filming the people that are observing me swearing.
Yeah.
And then I turn around and smile. I said, okay, we got you. And I mean, there was one mom, and she had her hand on her mouth like this, and it was like a movie scene. Yeah, this is something really bad is happening. And then I said, I just did that for a reason, because you're not going to go to a tennis tournament and not hear profanity.
Right.
And, not that I condone it, but okay, this is just how it works. Mm-hmm. And, and I spent a lot of time in the Bible Belt too. And, growing up, my parents were devout Catholics, so Catholicism, I was, God is everywhere. Mm-hmm. And there's a side story to that too. we grew up right by this. There's this ice hockey rink, and behind it there was a cemetery. We had a mile run, a 2-mile run, 3-mile run. We spent all sorts of time in the cemetery. And this goes way off on a tangent. So I'm the youngest, and my father passes away, and I'm 27 years old, and it's in the wintertime, so you don't bury people in the wintertime. And my mother said, well, he'll be buried in such and such cemetery. And I said, really? And the cemetery was the Catholic cemetery. And I said, well, I think he should be buried in the name of the cemetery. He should be buried in the Evergreen Cemetery. And my mother kind of looked at me, and I said, well, I went to Catholic school, and I said, well, the nuns are everywhere. The nuns told me that God's everywhere. I said, if God's everywhere, he's in that Evergreen Cemetery. So my mother didn't say anything, but my father was buried. And then, I have a brother who passed away. They're buried in the Evergreen Presbyterian Cemetery. But coming back to the Bible Belt is, but I do think that young players especially is that, someone's a bad person. Someone is going straight to hell in a handbasket if they swear. But that level of intensity, I just think that you could comment upon that. That's it. That goes with one parenting style versus the other, right? Is that the?
I feel like that's more communication.
Yeah.
I feel like any parent. Yeah, I feel like depending on the person, they could fall under any parenting style, but they could be, cursing for whatever reason, right? So yeah, depending on, like you said, if it's about, they're cursing at the child for, performance or for bad attitude or whatever, or versus, they're in bad traffic and they're cursing at the cars around them in the bad traffic. I think those parenting style, I think that just depends more so on the person. But again, kids are always watching. They watch. They are watching, and they're so smart. Like before I started doing this, I was nannying, and the 2-year-old that I was watching, I couldn't believe the things he would pick up on. I'm like, what? So they are always watching, and they're like sponges. Even when you're, even teenagers, sponges, because they're just trying to figure it out, just trying to make sense of the world and who they are and what's going on. And so, yeah, when they see that, okay, this is okay behavior. I can do this. And then when they get in trouble for doing it, then that's where, the confusion starts. But that was one of the sayings that I heard. Don't do as I do as I say.
I'm not sure where Jim Lair picked this up. I don't think he necessarily picked it up from, academia, formal study. Maybe it's an original idea, but this is the first time I heard it was years ago. That tell a player, and they can be part of a team sport, go off by yourself. Whether get away from people, just go for a jog, and you go yell, scream, swear, get it out of your system. And I think that's the same thing applies to parents. Is that one of the best things to do is go for a walk. Just get yourself away from it.
Get it out of your system.
But not confront the. And many times it's not winning or losing; it's a behavioral problem.
Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to timing, like what you're saying. Like sometimes it's better to cool off, go for the walk, let it out, process, and then come back to the conversation later when you've cooled off and your athlete's cooled off, or again, if it's another relationship, teammates or coach, athlete, whatever, depending on the situation. So
validation. This is from your course.
Yes.
Almost a sentence, not written in full, but better decisions and processing emotions leads to a more fulfilling life. Why don't you comment on validation?
Yeah, so validation, when you're using validation, you are showing the person that you're talking to that their feelings and their thoughts are of importance and of value. Okay, what I like to say is when you're invalidated by someone, it's like stubbing your toe. It hurts like heck, and it's super annoying, right? And so to validate someone, It does. It helps them to, one, recognize their emotions, to feel like their emotions are of value, like how they're feeling about a situation. It makes sense, right? It makes sense that they're feeling this way, and that's normal. And then two, because that they are learning that, hey, okay, it makes sense that I'm feeling this. The person that I care about, that I'm going to with these feelings and these thoughts, are telling me that it's of importance. They're going to be more emotionally intelligent, right? And that goes with empathy as well. Empathy is a deeper understanding and an ability to share the emotion with the athlete or with the person that you're talking to. And so with validation and empathy, you're going to help your athlete to become more emotionally intelligent, to where when decisions need to be made, we're not making them off of the way that we feel, right? I think that's a big misconception, and takes the our we as humans, it takes away from us, right? We make a lot of decisions off of the way that we feel, and we're told that is what we do, and we don't have to do that. And so the more emotionally intelligent you become, the better able you are to recognize your emotions, to sit with your emotions, to process your emotions, so that when you need to make a decision or behave in a certain manner, you are not acting in that emotion. You're choosing a decision that aligns with your values and the person that you want to be.
Validation increases trust and safety.
Yep. So going back to that, right? Like I said, with by allowing your athlete to recognize, hey, your feelings right now are of value. The fact that you're feeling nervous, yes, it makes sense. I feel nervous when I have to present in front of my boss. It makes sense. That little statement right there shows them that, hey, my nerves are important. My nerves are of value. And then they feel safe going to you. If you're invalidating someone, they're going to go to you less and less, because they're afraid to tell you what they're feeling. They're afraid to tell you what they're experiencing, because they don't want you to judge them. They don't want you to think of them in a negative manner. They don't want you to tell them what they're feeling is wrong, and that they shouldn't be feeling that way. And that's hard to do, because that's what it's always been. It's what it's always been, you know? But the more that you learn how to, again, validate, it's gonna open up the doors, and the athlete will start coming to you more, for sure.
I think this is a powerful statement from your course. Validation brings down the intensity and makes the conversation more productive.
Yep. It takes down the walls. So as soon as you invalidate someone, walls go up. Anger increases. The emotion turns from, sadness or embarrassment or shame or whatever it is, to, I am shutting off right now because you just completely, made me feel bad about feeling bad, or I am angry and I'm going to lash out at you. You've just thrown fuel into the fire, and let's go. Right. And again, it's a parent athlete course, but a lot of this stuff can apply to any relationship that you have, from coworkers to your partner to your kid. So that's the really cool part about this course.
I like that. As far as walls, I've told players many times, they're building their own wall brick by brick.
Yeah.
And, they're protecting themselves. And in some ways, okay, yeah, we know there's situations where a kid has to do that. I sent an intern, somebody who spent some time here recently. It wasn't that long, but it seemed like a long time to the intern. It was just 2 months. One of our older students, who now is a head coach of a college program, he played at Trinity. There's Trinity in Connecticut, Trinity in Texas. He played at Trinity in Connecticut. And the squash coach has won many, many national championships. And it's like Dave Schwartz, who was on a couple of weeks ago. I mean, he's won a bunch of national championships. I think, okay, I'm going to stop and listen to this guy.
Yeah.
or this gal, anybody who's won. It's not so easy to win a national title. But the gentleman, the squash coach, the title of his book is Run to the Roar. And it really comes from how the lions hunt.
Okay.
And the old lion can't run very fast, but they have the loudest, scariest roar.
Okay.
And the antelope run away from the roar. But my question to you is, don't you think that we can go too much to one side? And there should be a roar, though. And the kid, just like a Sharapova, my father's yelling at me, but it's like a football coach and a quarterback on the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
And there's intensity, and there's 100,000 people in the background, and the noise is just over the top.
Right.
But the quarterback's just looking at the coach, nodding.
Uh-huh.
What are your comments? Run to the roar. I think that a lot of times when the coach, there's some positives with the intensity. There's like there's a negative and a positive, positive, negative. There's two sides to the story.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't you think sometimes that the parents can lower the intensity too much?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, and that's where you have to find the happy balance. But I think that, so I think you can have validation and empathy and still have the roar, right? If I dislike something that, I don't know, my sibling does or my partner does, and we're having a conversation about it, and there's so much more that goes into it, my tone, my nonverbals, but I can say, I understand that you felt this way and that it bothered you and that's how you responded, but I feel hurt about it and I don't appreciate that and I don't feel respected. To me, that's a roar. I don't think you need, if you want to yell it, you can, but I think just that comment there is enough to be a roar, in my opinion. So, yeah.
With the intern, Run to the Roar is to go back to find your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to break the comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
Yvonne was telling me earlier that, he had read and heard, perhaps it was a course that you remember, but what I remember from the conversation was many times there's no change without drama. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's a light bulb going off, right? I think that's a light bulb going off. So again, like the comment that I just made, I think that makes all the difference. Silence, like changing it up. If you're someone that gets in the car and doesn't stop talking to your athlete, and then all of a sudden you just like don't talk to them in the car, they're going to be like, what is wrong? Like, what's going on? Right? Vice versa. And I think parents know their athletes best. I think, again, awareness of the parent is important. But for me, I sought out, I sought out, I wanted a coach that was going to yell at me. I did. Now I will say my travel coach, he knew me to where like if I beat myself up, he'd just pull me out of the game and that was enough. He didn't have to yell at me. I'd go sit on the bench and he knew I was beating myself up enough that he didn't want to. Flip side, I worked with a trainer one-on-one. My mom, bless her heart, 6:30 a.m., get there at 6 a.m., courts, right? And he was in my face screaming at me constantly and also making me yell every single thing that I did for every drill to get me to communicate more. But he was in my face and I loved it. Did I break down and cry? Yes, multiple times, especially when, I had some tough stuff going on in my life. But I wanted that. And so, but I think, depending on the person, depending on the athlete, they're not going to be motivated by that. They're going to shut off. They're not going to, and then it's, okay, how productive is this? So I think that's what's so important about, any adult working with a child or building a relationship with a child, understanding that athlete and figuring out what's the best way for you to connect with them. Is it the roar? like his name was Steve. Coach Steve. Coach Steve, he was a roar and I loved it. But then Coach Larkin, he knew. I mean, he would throw stuff on the sidelines. He'd throw his clipboard and things, which was like the scary part of it. But he would not yell at me because he knew. And then when he knew I cooled off, he'd put me back in. So yeah, I think it just depends on like understanding your athlete and figuring out what works. And I think that's like experimenting and exploring. You know, it doesn't have to be like one way. It can be, okay, we're getting in the car and I'm nonstop talking. This doesn't seem to be working. Let me try something else, right? I'm getting in the car and I'm screaming at them. This isn't working. Let me try silence, and just kind of figuring out what really connects with them the most.
One thing I tell tennis players, and group dynamics is a factor, but the coach is maybe running 4 courts, 6 courts, and there's a lead coach. And, maybe there's just one coach. I've been called many things. One is that word that penetrates glass. You're in traffic and you make a mistake and you just tell what that one word, 2 syllables, what the person's calling you. So I've been called that, not based on my traffic skills, but just how I coach in tennis and this and that. But Andy Fitzello started our podcast, he'll call me Rambo. And it was circumstantial. It was certainly the 80s. It was the program I was running for tennis teachers. But I had to have a whistle on because I was really directing 100 people at the same time.
Wow.
And you definitely learn to just say go. Go. You tell somebody to do something, and they're asking questions, just go. And but I do think the peaceful warrior, quieting the mind, is that it would apply to the sport you grew up in, basketball, is that there's all this noise on the outside, but it doesn't need to be noise on the inside. But I do think that's where those conversations with a child, I think that if you comment on this, where many times the question's asked and the kid is, like you said, they're processing, the parent has to just wait for the answer.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they just can't.
No, it's so hard to do. Like I said, I was trained to do silence, like in grad school. I mean, all these skills that I learned, I took a class. It was literally a semester class where that's all we did. And we were, learning, and we were recorded, and we were, constantly getting feedback. And so, I mean, it's tough. It's so tough. And sometimes even still, I have to catch myself because I just I'll be in sessions and, again, I have to read the athlete. If it's a thinker, if it's someone that is a thinker and they're more quiet, you got to give them time. Some people
introvert, same thing.
Yeah. Some people are like they're talkers, and as soon as you ask a question, they're answering immediately, and but then when they stop and they have to think, okay, let me give them some silence and see, because this is like hitting something for them, right? But yeah, silence is huge, and it's very difficult to do, especially when you want the answer and you know the answer. I think, or the answer you want.
You mentioned that phrase that we've all heard, light bulb moment. I think it's so important to recognize the parent and the coach for the player to know, hey, this is a light bulb moment. But I think many times they miss it.
Yeah. And then going to, again, I think communication's just like, I love communication. And I wish that it was taught more, like in school. Growing up, we learn all this other stuff, but we don't learn how to do the one thing that we are constantly using throughout the day, and in our lives. But besides the point, it's so important, and and it's just, I mean, I lost my train of thought because I just get so caught up in the fact that communication is just something that we've never learned really how to do. We never learn, and then we wonder why we're like in these controversial, like, conversations, and and not feeling understood and all this stuff. And it's like we never learned how to use silence. We never learned how to actively listen to people. We just go off of what we learned from our parents and what we make of in school. And even in school, we're just sitting and staring at the teacher that's telling us what to do.
I want to come back to this one line as well. It's in the notes, but years ago I was told, and it's a great way to remember things, is make everything a story. Well, Brandon Flanagan, who we both know really well, he recommended that I read the book Championship Teacher. And one thing in that book, if the championship teacher never calls on the kid who raises their hand. And then when you call on someone who doesn't raise their hand,
yeah,
and then they say, and very quickly they're going to go, I don't know. And then what you do as a teacher, and this is obviously in a classroom setting, is that you move on to the next person. You say, but you just say, okay, well, just wait. And from that book, that's where I got that idea from, is you just wait, and it doesn't take very long. You say, well, no, but just wait. You have the answer, and they have the answer, but they're too nervous, they're too insecure. I mean, they don't want to speak in front of the group. So no, we'll just wait. Yes. And it's amazing that very seldom do they not have the answer. But I wanted to come back to this right here. I just made a mark on the notes here with validation. Yeah, show interest and take them seriously. But I think too many times the interest is on the result.
Yep.
Let me ask you a question about basketball. As a basketball player, I mean, how much afterwards was the discussion among your teammates on, the officiating? Didn't go your way, bad calls.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, one thing, tennis players with cheating, the way the human eye works, you're going to find out even people who are not really cheaters are going to make some bad calls. But there's people that cheat so bad that they actually see the ball out. They want to win so badly. But I say, well, no, cheating in tennis is definitely bad. But actually, it's amazing how many players cheat themselves. And they cheat themselves when it comes to nutrition or flexibility and doing all these routines and such. I want to touch a little bit more on modeling, and then we can get into feedback and the reinforcement.
Yeah. So as I said, modeling is so powerful because you're able to show them what you mean. It's one thing. Sometimes we're not very direct in what we're talking about, and the receiver, the person that's receiving the message, just interprets it the way that they think, but they don't actually know what you mean by it, and then they go to try to do it, and it's like, nope, that's wrong. And it's like, what? That's what you just said, but no, that's wrong. So it's kind of like in tennis, you're demonstrating the action, right? You're showing them the technique. I see you do that a lot with like the shadow swinging, have the kids like stand up in the front. And show it, but that's like same with parenting or teaching your athlete how to pointing it out as well. Like if you do something where it's like a behavior that you want your athlete to do, point it out. Did you see what I just did? You see how I like picked myself up after I dropped the dish? Something as simple as that, rather than like getting upset with myself. I use it a lot in my sessions, especially the group ones. Like if I make a mistake or I forget about something or, model the fact that I'm feeling nervous when I first start with a group, but I work through it and I use the techniques that I talk about, and then it just kind of flows. So just really anything that you can do, but making sure to point it out and working through it with your athlete, so that then they know, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. I see it now. Like I know now. I know what is wrong. And it's also like a nice check for yourself too, once you start to like take notice to like things that you're actually doing.
you don't really think very often, well, the model parents, the model tennis player, the 5 E's of player development, we go through it where it's enjoyment. It's not little hit and giggle fun, but do you enjoy the process? Enjoy the grind, the work,
Yeah.
the ups and downs, just the whole package. And then you go to education, then experience, exposure, then a really, safe overall environment. But having the exposure, it's amazing. People just need the parents as well. I think, okay, how big is your circle? How big is your lens?
Yeah.
And, okay, you're playing in the early age groups, 12, 14 years old, and you've only played, okay, you've been to some tournaments where they've waved some international flags, but is that really, have you really played tennis at an international level? With the feedback and reinforcement, there's the movie, I'm trying to think of the name of the movie, the drummer, two worst words in the English language put together are good job. I actually know the name of that movie. It's very intense.
I think I've seen clips of it.
Yeah, it's with the drummer, and
Yeah.
I've had musicians say, it's over the top, and it's never really quite that way. But it was,
Yeah.
it's definitely a great movie we're seeing, and I'll write it I'll remind people when we put this podcast up. I'll research what's the name of that movie. Yeah, but don't say good job.
Yeah.
Why do you? It says right here, don't say great job all the time.
All the time. Why? Because that invalidates the athlete if they don't think they did well. And then you just add to the fire. So a lot of times what you see is they don't think they did well. Or they get off the court and that's your immediate response. You did great. Great job. And they're like, no, I didn't. Right? Like, or they just shut down or walk away or whatever. And so it's again, reading the body language. If it seems appropriate, say it. But if not, then it's more like exploring what they feel and what they think about how they did. And that could be as simple as, and if you know it was a tough match, say it was a tough match. Wow, that was really tough. That was a hard one. Like, I can see that you feel upset about it. Like something as simple as that, I can see you feel upset about the match. And that's not saying that you don't think they did well. That's just, again, validating the experience. And so that just helps them to like, it takes down the wall. It's like, yeah, I am not happy with the way that it went. Yeah.
We had a podcast, Steve Robertson, who I worked for a company that he worked for. I was brought in to train the tennis teachers, and he was a staff pro many, many years ago. But he like yourself, has been in the kid business for a long time.
Yeah.
And his book is on Gen Z.
Oh boy.
Aliens Among Us. And it's for example to stop and think about the microwave. And years ago, it took so long to prepare a meal.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the woman didn't, it was just circumstantial. They didn't work outside the house because, there was no such thing as, going here in Florida, Publix and buying a pre-cooked chicken,
Right.
It was like, okay, I've been to countries where still to this day, you buy the chicken and at least they've plucked the feathers for you, but that's about it.
Wow.
And, but with that, times have changed, and now the telephone, it's like how much screen time does someone actually have? But I find that many times the athletes are not really around their parents like they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And even wealthy families, like when I was a kid, go back to the dinosaur days, but one TV and 3 generations in one room,
right,
watching a sporting event.
Yeah.
And there's so much education.
Right.
And now, I know tennis kids for the most part, they don't even watch tennis. They can go after their own room. It's very passive.
Yeah.
It's not like they're playing basketball in the house because, they have their phone to go to, their iPad to go to.
Right.
But I really think that changes the communication process. I think years ago, and I like what you said about the parent saying, "Hey, I had a bad day at the office,"
Yeah.
and that's an expression that's gone away.
Yeah.
You could actually say that to a 12, 13-year-old tennis player. Hey, you're having a bad day at the office,
Yeah.
and to me, they knew where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I think now some of those expressions, and that comes back to technology, and there's just not enough time spent together
Mm-hmm.
and spent together doing the same things. And it's and also too is that, well, your world is your world, my world is my world. We only come together when we're watching you compete or we're at one of your practices.
Right.
And then everybody just kind of goes off on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And they can be at a table in a restaurant and it's a mom and dad with 2 kids and all 4 of them are on the phone.
Yeah.
So they're at the same table, but as you said, they're not really they're not engaged and they're not in the same place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do think those type of things are a factor.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about leading to complacency and dependence, the feedback.
Yeah. So I think that could go 2 ways. If you are constantly telling them, good job, and they're needing reassurance from you, that's going to cause dependency, right? It's going to cause dependency because they need that from you. Also, on the flip side of that, if you're someone that is there again, so like in the course, I talk about the difference between feedback and reinforcement. Feedback is instruction on things that you did well, you did wrong, and how to correct it or find new solutions, whatever. Reinforcement is it's reinforcing behavior. So you are doing something to where you are creating a pattern of behavior or changing a pattern of behavior. So you could be giving feedback, but depending on how you're giving that feedback can be reinforcing it in different ways. So a parent could be like, talking to their athlete about their attitude on court, and the way that they deliver that message could reinforce the behavior in different ways. So going back to your question, right? If you're constantly giving feedback that is, again, great job, you're doing great, and they're always looking for that, they're going to be dependent on you. Flip side, the looking over constantly at mom and dad to see if they're upset with you, that can also be dependency. They're looking for reassurance that you are not upset with them. So then, and that's like where they start to fear the failure, they start to fear letting mom and dad down, and that's that dependency, that feedback and reinforcement that they're getting from your nonverbals on the side of the court, and looking to you constantly. It's like, okay, am I in trouble? Was that good? I don't know. Like constantly looking over. So
I have to get this in because I don't know if we've ever had a podcast where we haven't mentioned Vic Braden, but Vic Braden is so positive. Santa Claus, jolly guy. But he used to always use this: every day it's not a golden day. And I do think that cheerleading is important, to be uplifted. Like if someone, I like the expression, if you can't be for yourself, who will be?
Yeah.
You got to get to the point where you can cheerlead yourself through it. But I do think there's too much rah-rah at times.
Yeah.
Like I got my Starbucks coffee and we're here and this is great. And
yeah.
And it's not. But yeah, telling it like it is. I do think in the industry I'm in, edifying, it's just amazing. I just tease and yeah, you're great. I'm great. We're both great. Isn't this great that we're both great? And it's just over the top. Ask your child how they should be punished.
That's an interesting one. And that, you kind of said this earlier, but that would be it would be more so for older. You could experiment it with younger athletes, but it's giving them options. So saying, okay, You know, if the punishment is, you know, you could choose between no phone for a week or no tablet for a week. I don't know. I'm just thinking.
Those would be strong.
Those would be strong.
Those would be powerful.
Yeah. Or I mean, you know, you could even go no tennis for a week, or no phone for a week. What's the punishment? You know, what do you choose for what you did? And then that gives them choice in that. And I think what also is cool is you could flip it and do rewards as well. Okay, if you complete your chores, you can get ice cream, or you can get, you know, a $5 gift from Target or something. I don't know, just throwing stuff out there, but or extra time on the court or dessert after whatever it is, and then they get to choose what their reward is. I know it works well too when you can sit down with your athlete and say, okay, you know, let's figure out a couple options for if you do something disrespectful, and what are some consequences. Let's come up with a few options. Let's come up with a few options for rewards. And when those things happen, when the consequence needs to happen, we'll sit down and talk about, okay, which one are you choosing? You know, same thing with the rewards. That just gives them a little bit more autonomy, and yeah.
So it's very much like setting up a contract.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah, you could, rather than just saying, okay, no phone for a week. Bye.
With, I think of Bjorn Borg, where loved tennis and misbehaving. And, you know, I've read 6 weeks, 6 months, but he was pulled out of the game. And then he came back, and from that point forth, he was the Iceman.
Wow.
You know, he was someone who just was out of control as far as his court behavior, his conduct. A player who became a very good tennis player, obviously lesser known than Borg, but Elliot Telscher. I remember Braden used to tell that story. That was for 6 weeks. One of our students, he had the opportunity. Harvard saved a spot for him.
Wow.
And, you know, so that means that you're an achiever from a very early age. So as a student athlete, he turned Harvard down. But, the father, the family, the father, the mother, you know, they came to work with us. We did video work. And then from that point forth, they did it on their own. They never worked with a coach outside of that. And they came to see us several times. When they were younger, it was more times per year. Mm-hmm. But why that story comes to my mind is that there was many times where his kids were not playing tennis. I don't think, for the most part, parents they're a bluff. Mm-hmm. In other words, that the storm, the ranting and the raving, and then in the end, the storm settles and there are no consequences. They just are told, okay, it's just noise, because the parents were angry and screaming, but they didn't say, I do think there's a lot to be said. I'd like to ask you this, is treat the athlete like it's a real world. I mean, what would happen if it was the workplace? Yeah. You're going to be demoted, you're going to be promoted. Mm-hmm. What do you think of that comment?
It's an interesting one. I think that's a lesson learned pretty quick. Right. That's a pretty quick lesson to learn. But yeah, figuring out how to do that if you want to do that. But it's definitely, that would be a quick lesson for sure.
Ice hockey comes up on these podcasts, and a one-way contract. Now you have these marquee players, and they're making so much money, and the players are making more than the coach. At least in other sports, the tennis is just upside down, backwards, inside out. It's like Patrick Mortogolu paid Serena Williams to coach her. It's like I have to start hitting my head against the table.
Wow.
That in pro tennis, Dimitrov is a great talent. People looked at his resume. His first 7 years, he had 7 coaches. Wow. So the pro go, well, it's not working out. I think we'll go in a different direction.
Right.
But in ice hockey, a one-way contract, they move the decimal. So, years ago, if someone was making $400,000, whatever the number would be. You go to the minors, you make 40,000. So there's no, it's like there's no pep talks. This is the way it is.
This is the way it is.
I think that's where your sport, basketball, is that, you could, it's good to have a timeout and bring the kid out of the game and talk to him, put him back in. But that connection between the bench and the brain is, hey, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. But when you comment on the parents don't really, when it comes down to punishment, they don't really have a bench. In other words, if the child's not, the opposite of expectations or disappointments, they're not handling their deal of the bargain, which is just great attitude, great effort.
Yeah. I think the bench would be taking away the sport, depending on the athlete. I'm pretty sure my parents tried to use that on me too. If you keep doing this, you're not playing. You're not going to that tournament. You're not going to practice for a week. No basketball, period. I fixed myself real quick. So I guess that would be the bench, in my opinion.
I made a video today for a young player. I talked about golf. I talked about baseball. I talked about basketball. And I know a lot of tennis players are around golf. And an American kid should know basketball. Yeah. They really should. And years ago, it was a given. It wasn't fair for women years and years ago, but it was a given that people knew baseball. But with in basketball, I think the number's 300 that at the end of a college basketball practice. Kobe Bryant, in college basketball, 300 foul shots. Then practice is over, you got to make 300. The managers are there pushing the balls back quickly so they can get it done. Yeah. And then when you stop and think about it, that's what the moms or the dads are doing that in the driveway. So the kid could just practice more shots, more reps. Yeah. But that standing in one place, that's where we tell tennis players, you need to have the golfer's mentality. You need to have great technique. That's one topic to review is technique and skills. Yeah. With the parents, don't you think that there's really not much that they kind of bypass that? They're not, it becomes so emotional. They're not even thinking about the technique. They're not really thinking about the skills. They're just thinking about, like the child, they're thinking about the outcome. Definitely.
Yeah. And I feel like that ties into the first lesson of the first module of the course. There's so much investment and hopes for the kid and knowing how much they work. And so when the results aren't there, you can get really caught up in the result that you don't even talk about. And then too, like you said earlier, some parents are even new to the sport. Neither of my parents. My mom didn't play sports, and my dad was a wrestler, played baseball. He didn't do any basketball. He never played it. I don't think, not that I know of. So they didn't know much about it. And my dad would try with court awareness and like cutting and angles. He'd try to help me and talk with me about that stuff.
But he was a wrestler.
He was a wrestler, yeah.
Well, if he was a wrestler, I have respect for anybody who's a wrestler.
Yeah, he was a wrestler.
I remember the wrestlers up and down the ropes and wearing the rubber suits, trying to make weight. Yeah, yeah. My oldest sister at one time was a school teacher, and she just was beside herself. She had these, people that wrestlers, they haven't eaten in 3 days. Or it's just amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is.
With, I'll ask Yvonne to send you this, and we'll put it on Facebook. We have a clip. You get a kick out of it. It's from our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied. It's tennis kids drop hitting forehands and backhands into a basketball hoop.
Interesting.
And the message really is, in tennis, your target is just like basketball. In basketball, your target is small and elevated. Mm-hmm. It's an optical illusion, not like tennis. You obviously grew up where, two balls went through the hoop at the same time. Yeah. But it looks like the rim's the same size as the ball.
The ball, yep.
And it's amazing to watch how people, especially how they're teaching the forehand today. It's like, are you kidding me? And the kids drop hitting balls. I mean, several of them went on to Power 5 conferences and played, and
There you go.
but that's just part of your sport. Where the basketball, you could make that standstill shot, from, what is it? My lingo, the top of the key, is it what, 10 feet up and 15 feet back, and you just see the technique of basketball players always tease that, well, maybe not Shaq, but it's pretty much,
Nowadays, yes, the technique is, yeah.
Palm to the target, and that's probably a key word to use. We always talk about the air target over the net and the target on the court. But why don't you just summarize with your course, Parents of Champions? There's obviously keywords and buzz phrases, but the target is, day by day, inch by inch. I mean, there's so many things where people are missing the target because it's so much about, winning, and it's so much about results, and you've heard it all, you say it all, the process. I mean, all the great mind vitamins, but your target has been parents. Is to summarize, tell people how to get to the course, and emphasize a few key points. I really think it's great to have you on, and parents would be wise. I do tell kids, your parents have wisdom, you don't. You just have wisdom teeth, because wisdom is knowledge with time. But the parents would be wise, and wise goes with wisdom. The parents would be wise to take your course. But why don't you just summarize a few key points, and we'll call it a day.
Yeah, definitely. So it's really, the course is to self-reflect, become more aware, find direction in what you truly care about, and in the parenting style that you want to have, and then learning communication skills to have more of those open and safe conversations, while, again, being aware of your stuff and what truly matters to you with your athlete, and by doing that and slowly working toward using those skills and showing your values and things like that, it's going to lead to trust, more confidence, on both ends, and better communication, more open communication. So yeah, you can find it if you go to my Facebook, which is at Coach Nicole _E. Same thing with Instagram at Coach Nicole _E. And you go into the bio, you could click the link in the bio. You can find the course there. It'll say Parents of Champions course.
Dave Fitch, who was a guest on our podcast, the oldie goldie Harvard coach for years and years. He says he loves podcasts. We have these lengthy podcasts, and a lot of people say, "I'll keep them going." We have these 1-minute Instagram video clips.
Yeah.
But with talk radio, I can remember wanting to really be in on a college hockey game, and the only way was to listen to it on radio.
Yeah.
And my son Connor was born in 1990, so it's not that he's that old, but I can remember he'd be playing some matches, and you couldn't watch it, but you could listen to it. So they were streaming the sound, and he was playing doubles one time. It was just amazing, not to mention who he's playing with. He played doubles with quite a few people. I know he won Doting Dad. He won 3 tournaments in a row on the lower minor league circuit, where he had a different partner each week.
Wow.
But he was playing with someone, and you just heard, and he missed a backhand volley. And he missed a backhand volley. We mention Braden all the time. To really study Braden is like, just with your course, okay, that's a very powerful sentence. Write that sentence down, and let's go through that one sentence. And that's where, with your course, not just go through it once, but you should really go through it more than once. Yeah. And this is my opinion. You could comment on this, is that the parent and the player, I think, would be best to go through some of it together. Okay, let's just go through that one segment.
Yeah. And
go down the road together. But yeah, there's radio, and he misses a backhand volley, and he misses a backhand volley. But coming back to studying Braden, is it's not so easy to do today, but you used to be able to just go up to a TV and turn a knob and the picture would be totally, the picture would be totally black.
Wow.
And then you could listen to Braden teach.
Wow.
And then it's okay, now we're going to study Braden. We're going to study the tape of him teaching and we're going to watch the tape, but with no sound.
Interesting.
And, to really study Braden, and he passed away. I remember so many people were so nice. Yeah, I knew everything about Vic. And, they could just gesture with their hand on a forehand or a backhand. And it's like, you just knew they really didn't know much about Vic as far as what he did with information. But what do you think about the car being a classroom and the people doing your course together?
Definitely. I think yes to both. I think just turning on the videos on your audio and listening to it is huge while you're driving. And then also going through it with your athletes, also huge, because then they know where you're coming from. They can also learn some things as well. And you could have some really great conversations around it too.
Coming back to the silence is golden though. Sometimes like I'm just going to go for a walk and I'm not going to listen to a podcast. Some people just constantly listen to music, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take that much to get through. We say it all the time, and hopefully we're sharing golden nuggets for people's tennis treasure chest. For a 3-hour podcast, it takes 1% of someone's week. It's like, okay, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there.
Right.
But no, I'm glad to hear you say that the car should be a classroom.
Yeah.
Come back to Rob and Sherry Krychek. It was just this summer that they were here. The parents were here and speaking to a group of our parents and players. But they did just that. They made the car a classroom.
There you go.
And I think also with, in tennis, I'm first one to say that we really need to turn to other sports. Yeah. And you can learn from all sports.
Yeah, I agree. But
this has definitely been a learning session. Nicole Erickson, the Viking, give me the high five. Wave goodbye to the camera.
Goodbye.
Podcast 151 in the books. Thank you for listening. Come again. Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yes, thank you.
If you would send me a text